Well, thanks, Jim, and the committee here for inviting me to come talk to this community here today. Um, this is a sort of introductory meeting of sorts. Jake opened up yesterday with being able to kind of look at the list of people on the call and recognize a lot of people. I'm kind of in the opposite camp where I'm sort of a newcomer to this particular planetary data science community. And so I wanted to do a little bit of introduction to myself and get you a little bit more familiar with the work that I'm trying to do to help enable the scientific enterprise with Artemis. So next slide. So the way we're approaching getting science integrated within Artemis is through this structure here that Sarah Noble has presented in various forms in the last few months. But effectively, we're building science teams. And one particular aspect of this team that we're going to have persistent throughout the course of Artemis missions is this internal science team. And so I sit as the software systems lead on that internal science team that's charged with effectively building out the capability that's going to stand the test of each coming Artemis mission. And so as solicited teams come and go to support any given mission, what are the institutional and infrastructural capabilities that we're building up so that we have capacity to deal with the onslaught of coming data that's going to come out of these missions. And so today I'm going to talk specifically about the vision and strategy I've been formulating for that and some of the near-term active ongoings that matter for that. So go to the next slide, please. And so jumping right into the mission and vision, here I've outlined the sort of content that I've been socializing within the internal science team and trying to get out to the community at large with you all. So I'm eager to hear feedback on these concepts and topics. For the mission, what are we trying to achieve? Aiming for the data and software team to organize and make the mission science data useful for Artemis missions and the broader public community. In terms of the vision, hitting on themes of interoperability, making sure that all phases of the mission are supported, and that the science mission data, as much of it as we can, get it back out into the public. Next slide, please. And so to achieve that vision, I've got this 4-part strategy. And the rest of the talk will go into some of the active areas that are addressing these strategies. So strategy 1, consolidate, create, and curate. That's lunar science data. Strategy point 2, distribute this lunar data to support the actual mission. 3, create and deploy interoperable data and software functionality that supports those personnel. And then 4, getting as much of this data out into the public sphere. And so when I'm talking data in this case for this audience, I'm talking specifically to geologic and mapping data that has been the focus of this workshop. And for addressing these 2 components, I've got the Artemis geospatial data team that I'll talk about, and then the EVA mission system software efforts that are underway. So next slide, please. So in terms of the geospatial data team, this is a newly formed team within the NASA ecosystem. I've cited here a few references that describe this in more detail. These are the folks of GIS experts inside of NASA that are supporting site selection process and building up the capacity to make sure that the mission has the map needs in order for the mission to make informed decisions and the personnel to make informed decisions. One core component of this is a recently released lunar surface data book, of which I encourage you to read, get familiar with. And I think this community here has a lot to say, and I think there's a perfect section in this document that's currently reserved for geologic maps that I think there's a lot of room for distillation and influence. So next slide, please. In terms of the EVA mission system software initiative, there's an active area ongoing right now to really level up EVA mission planning, training, execution, and post-mission analysis. So there's 3 core tools here that I highlight. There's also a recently published paper that I encourage folks to go read to get a deeper dive into each of these tools and components. But what we're effectively doing is bringing EVA ops into the modern area of software capability. We're digitizing EVA procedure and authoring execution, putting all mission data into mission context by temporally aligning every single data product we can get our hands on within the mission, and then creating this spatio-temporal awareness for EVA planning and execution via our Aegis tool. This work is also heavily influenced by what Kelsey talked about yesterday in the jet testing efforts, where the flight teams and the actual core ops users of these tools are trying to practice like they want to play, and our teams are right there with them, learning what features matter to them, and making sure that we're starting to build out capability that's going to be used for realsies in an Artemis context. Next slide, please. And I wanted to kind of touch on this point here. We've got a wealth of modern map understanding, but what we're trying to use those maps for is in a work domain that hasn't quite touched map products in a very long time. And so what we've been doing internally for the last few years now is working closely with our EVA FOD counterparts, the flight operations folks that actually plan, train, fly, execute spacewalks, to start getting them to understand what they might be interested in getting out of maps. And so here's just some snapshots of the sort of canonical moments of temporary prototype flight products that those folks have started grappling with. And then the EVA mission system software team, the EMSS team, have been there all along, distilling what it is they're trying to do on top of a map in order to support the flight product creation and execution process. And so in the bottom right there is a later snapshot of what our Aegis tool currently looks like and is under active development now. Next slide, please. And just to kind of underpin the way we're trying to enable this process with our modern software is geologic mapping is part of these, is a core component of this. And if you look across these modes of the way we're trying to influence work, it's a two-way arrow. And so how can we start to get geologic maps to be an active and evolving component that all of these other products and phases of flight ops can keep up with? And as things evolve and grow and our understanding gets refined, all of this content can keep up with the conversation. Next slide, please. Here's a highlight of some of the more detailed components of what we've used, and specifically the map products themselves from Jet 3, and then an example of Jet 5. Alex Huff will be presenting at League next month, giving you a little bit more of a sense of this, and we'll also be publishing post Jet 5 a full narrative on the products that we've created and how we use them and what we liked and didn't like about them in the context of the flight products. And then I've provided some links here to the LPSC abstracts that talked about the map data specifically that we used for Jet 3 last year. Next slide, please. And so with that, I wanted to just kind of wrap it up and remind everyone here that Artemis isn't Apollo. This isn't a one or a few mission kind of adventure here. We've got 21st century digital capabilities, and we need to really be thinking deeply about applying those skills to the advancement of Artemis. Geospatial data is a paramount underpinning to all of this. And I'm going to be doing my best to connect the dots and make sure that the community at large has the right advocates pushing in the mission conversations, that we can get the data to and from the places it needs to go so that mission operators can make the right decisions. And so feel free to contact me. I'm eager to learn more and maybe cross paths in future workshops. But feel free to reach out, and I'm eager to hear the outcomes of this workshop and integrate that into the strategy that I outlined at the beginning of this talk. So with that, I'll yield my time back to Jim.